The little girl didn't cry. She stood in the middle of the restaurant, hands shaking, blood dried on her sleeve, eyes locked on the man everyone else was too afraid to look at. "Sir," her voice cracked. "They hurt my mom." The room froze, conversations died mid-sentence. Forks stopped clinking. Even the bodyguard stiffened because the man she was speaking to wasn't just rich, he was dangerous. The mafia boss slowly set his glass down and looked at her for the first time. "How?" he asked quietly. "She tried to protect me," the girl whispered. They didn't stop. Silence pressed in like a held breath. The boss stood. Chairs scraped as his men moved instinctively, but he raised a hand. Calm, controlled, he knelt in front of the girl, meeting her eyes. "Show me where," he said. Backhand index pointing right, "Stay till the end," because what happened next didn't just change one family's life. It rewrote the rules of who was allowed to hurt the powerless. The restaurant was built for power. Low lighting, heavy wood tables, thick leather chairs that swallowed sound. The kind of place where deals were made quietly and problems disappeared without witnesses. Everyone inside knew the rules. You didn't stare, you didn't ask questions, and you definitely didn't interrupt Victor Salerno while he was eating. Victor sat at the center table, his back straight, jacket draped casually over the chair beside him. A half-finished glass of bourbon rested near his hand. Around him, the air felt heavier, charged with awareness. His men occupied nearby tables, pretending to eat, pretending to talk, but never fully relaxing. The staff moved carefully, respectfully, fearfully. Victor didn't need to raise his voice. He rarely did. Power followed him like a shadow. He was listening to one of his lieutenants talk about shipments when the sound reached him. Not a shout, not a scream, a small voice. "Sir." The word floated through the room, fragile and out of place. Victor didn't react at first. Neither did anyone else. It took a second for people to realize the voice hadn't come from one of his men. It came from the aisle. A little girl stood there. She couldn't have been older than 7. Her hair was tangled, pulled back with a cracked plastic clip. One sleeve of her sweater was dark with dried blood. Her sneakers were mismatched, laces dragging against the carpet that cost more than most people's rent. Every adult instinct in the room screamed that she didn't belong there. The manager took one step forward, panic flashing across his face. "Hey," he started. Victor lifted one finger. The manager stopped instantly. Victor slowly turned his head. The girl's eyes locked onto his. They were wide, shiny. But she wasn't crying. That was what unsettled him most. "Yes," Victor asked calmly. The sound of his voice seemed to snap the room into focus. Conversations died. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Even the servers stopped moving. The girl swallowed. "Sir," she said again, her voice trembling now. "They hurt my mom." Victor's fingers stilled around his glass. "How?" he asked, not loudly, not angrily, just precisely. The girl's lower lip quivered. "She tried to protect me." A murmur rippled through the room, quickly silenced by the shifting of chairs as Victor's men straightened. Victor leaned back slightly, studying her. "Who is they?" he asked. The girl shook her head. "I don't know their names." Victor nodded once, accepting that. "Where is your mother now?" The girl pointed weakly toward the door. "In the car, she can't stand." Victor's jaw tightened, not visibly, but enough that the men closest to him noticed. "Did someone call the police?" Victor asked. The girl shook her head again. "They said not to." Victor looked past her toward the manager. "You," he said quietly. The manager nearly jumped out of his skin. "Why, yes, Mr. Salerno. Did you see anyone bring a bleeding woman into your parking lot tonight?" The manager swallowed hard. I saw a woman sitting in a car for a while, I thought." Victor's eyes flicked back to him. The manager's voice died. Victor stood. The scrape of his chair against the floor sounded like thunder in the silence. Instantly his men moved, but Victor raised his hand again. "No," he said, "stay." He walked toward the girl slowly, deliberately, lowering himself until he was kneeling in front of her. The room felt like it stopped breathing. "What's your name?" he asked. "Leela," she whispered. "Leela," Victor repeated. Did your mother tell you to come here? She nodded. She said to find someone who looks important. Victor almost smiled. Almost. Smart woman, he said softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a clean handkerchief, holding it out to her. For your arm. Leela hesitated, then took it. Thank you, she said automatically. Victor stood and turned to one of his men. Marco was already moving. Get the car, bring it to the front. Another man appeared at Victor's side. Boss, this could be a setup. Victor's eyes never left the girl. If it is, he said calmly, it's a stupid one. He looked down at Leela again. Can you show me where this happened? He asked. Leela nodded eagerly. Yes. Victor turned to the room. Finish eating, he told his men. I'll be back. No one questioned him. Outside, the night air was sharp and cold. The valet area was quiet, too quiet. Victor walked ahead, his men spreading out instinctively. Leela led him to an old sedan parked crookedly at the edge of the lot. Inside, a woman lay slumped against the steering wheel. Her face was swollen, one eye nearly shut. Blood dried along her temple and down her cheek. Her hands trembled as she tried and failed to sit up. Victor's expression changed, not to rage, to focus. He opened the door himself. Ma'am, he said gently, can you hear me? The woman's eyes fluttered open. Panic flashed across her face when she saw the men surrounding the car. Leela, she whispered. I told you to stay. She did exactly right, Victor said. He looked at Marco. Call a doctor, not an ambulance. Quiet. Marco nodded and stepped away. Victor crouched beside the car. Who did this? He asked the woman. She shook her head weakly. I don't know. They wanted money. When I said no, her voice broke. Victor exhaled slowly. Did they say where they'd be? He asked. She hesitated, then nodded. There's a warehouse by the river, she whispered. They said they'd come back if I talked. Victor straightened. He looked at Leela. You were very brave, he said. Leela's eyes filled with tears now, the shock finally breaking. Is my mom going to die? Victor knelt again, meeting her eye level. No, he said with absolute certainty. Not tonight. He stood and turned to his men. Get them somewhere safe, he said, nodding toward the mother and child. Feed them, clean her up, stay with them. And the warehouse? Marco asked. Victor's gaze hardened. I'm going there, he said. The engine of his car started behind him. Victor Salerno adjusted his cuffs as he climbed inside. For the first time that evening, the calm in his eyes sharpened into something dangerous. Because whoever had hurt that woman didn't know one very important thing yet. They hadn't just attacked a poor mother. They had interrupted Victor Salerno's dinner, and that was a mistake people rarely survived. The safe house was nothing like Leela had imagined. She expected something dark, scary. Maybe even like the places the men who hurt her mother had come from. Instead, it was quiet, warm. The car pulled into a gated property on the edge of the city, an old townhouse tucked behind tall hedges. Inside, the lights were soft. The furniture was simple but clean. The kind of place meant not to be noticed. Victor Salerno did not follow them inside. That alone unsettled his men. Marco watched Victor step back from the car, already dialing his phone, his expression unreadable. You'll stay here, Victor said to the mother, his tone firm but calm. Doctors are on the way, you're safe. The woman, Elena Ramirez, clutched her daughter's hand tightly. Why are you helping us? She asked weakly. Victor didn't answer directly. Because you didn't deserve what happened. That was all. He closed the door and turned away. Inside, Elena was laid gently on a couch while a private doctor arrived within minutes. Leela hovered nearby, refusing to let go. It's okay, sweetheart, the doctor said softly while examining Elena's injuries. You're going to be fine. Leela didn't look convinced. Her mother's face was bruised in places no child should have to see, one eye swollen, her lips split, her hands shaking not just from pain but from fear that had settled deep. They didn't stop, Leela whispered to the doctor, almost as if confessing, even when I cried. The room went quiet. One of Victor's men looked away. The doctor's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed gentle. She's safe now. Leela nodded slowly, then climbed onto the armchair beside the couch, curling in on herself. While Alina was treated, Marco knelt in front of Leela, keeping his voice low. "Can you tell me what happened?" he asked. Leela stared at the floor. "They came to the apartment." "Who?" Marco pressed gently. "Two men," she said. "They said my mom owed money." Marco glanced toward Alina, who had turned her head slightly, listening. "I told them we didn't have any," Alina whispered. "I clean offices at night. I barely make rent." Leela's fingers curled into the fabric of her sweater. "They pushed her," Leela said. I screamed. "One of them told me to shut up." Marco's jaw clenched. "Did they take anything?" he asked. Alina nodded faintly. "The little cash I had, my phone." "Did they say when they'd come back?" Marco asked. Alina hesitated, then nodded. "Tomorrow night." The word landed heavily. Elsewhere, Victor stood alone in his car, phone pressed to his ear. "I want everything on the warehouse by the river," he said quietly. "Names, faces, who's operating there." A pause. "Yes," Victor continued, "tonight." He hung up and stared at the dark city beyond the windshield. This wasn't about money. The men who had hurt Alina weren't professionals. They were predators, small-time criminals using fear where power didn't belong. Victor hated men like that. They caused attention, chaos, noise, and worse, they broke rules. Back inside, Alina's treatment finished. Her injuries were bad but not life-threatening. "You'll need rest," the doctor said, "and time." Alina nodded, tears sliding silently down her cheeks now that the shock had worn off. "I'm sorry," she whispered to Leela. "I tried to protect you." Leela climbed onto the couch and hugged her mother carefully. "You did." Marco stood and stepped aside as Victor entered the room. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Leela stiffened. Victor noticed. He knelt again, lowering himself so he wasn't towering over her. "You did the right thing," he told her. "You came to me." Leela looked at him cautiously. "Are you a police officer?" Victor paused. "No," he said honestly. Leela frowned. "Then why did everyone listen to you?" Victor considered his answer carefully. "Because I don't like bullies." That seemed to satisfy her. Alina looked at Victor with a mix of gratitude and fear. "They said if I talked, they won't touch you again," Victor said calmly. "How can you be sure?" Alina asked. Victor straightened slowly. "Because I won't allow it." The certainty in his voice sent a chill through the room. Later that night, when Leela finally fell asleep curled against her mother, Marco pulled Victor aside. "We got confirmation," Marco said. "Warehouse matches, 3 men running collections, no protection, no affiliation." Victor nodded. "That explains the stupidity." "They don't know who they crossed," Marco said. Victor's eyes darkened. "They will." Marco hesitated. "Boss, the kid." Victor glanced toward the couch where Leela slept. "She shouldn't have had to come to me," Victor said quietly. "That's the problem." He turned toward the door. "Get the car," he said. Marco followed, uneasy. As Victor stepped outside, the city air felt colder. He didn't feel anger, not the explosive kind. He felt responsibility. Men like him shaped the streets whether they admitted it or not. And when that power was abused by smaller, crueler men, the consequences mattered. Victor got into the car. "Warehouse," he said. As they pulled away, Victor glanced once more at the safe house in the mirror. Inside, a little girl slept, believing perhaps for the first time that night that someone strong was on her side. Victor Salerno had frozen when she spoke in the restaurant, not because he was surprised, but because he understood something instantly. If men like him didn't draw lines, then people like Alina and Leela paid the price. And tonight, Victor was done letting that happen. The warehouse sat at the edge of the river like a rotting tooth. Its windows were broken, patched with plywood and rusted metal sheets. A single floodlight flickered above the loading dock, buzzing faintly, struggling to stay alive. The place smelled of oil, damp concrete, and something sour that clung to the air. Victor Salerno watched it from inside the car. "Amateurs," he muttered. Marco sat beside him, checking his weapon not nervously but deliberately. 2 other cars idled nearby, engines low, lights off. These guys aren't connected, Marco said. No syndicate ties, no protection. Victor nodded. That makes them reckless. Reckless men hurt people like Alina because they believe no one powerful is watching. Victor opened the door. The cold night air rushed in. Stay back, he told his men. I want to hear them talk. Marco frowned slightly but didn't argue. He knew better. Victor walked toward the warehouse alone. Inside, 3 men sat around a folding table under the weak light. Empty beer cans littered the floor. A small stack of cash sat in the center of the table, already being counted again. One more run tomorrow, one of them said. That lady will cough it up, they always do. Another laughed. She looked like she was about to faint. Victor stepped into the light, the laughter stopped, all 3 men froze. Good evening, Victor said calmly. They stared at him, confused. Who the hell are you? One asked, trying and failing to sound tough. Victor glanced at the money on the table. That depends. Who do you think I am? The men exchanged looks. We don't want trouble, one of them said quickly. This is private business. Victor smiled faintly. That's the problem, he said. It is. One of the men reached under the table. Victor raised a hand. From the shadows, Marco and the others stepped forward. Weapons visible, faces cold, no uncertainty. The man's hand froze. Recognition dawned slowly, too slowly. Oh, the third man whispered. Oh, SH, Victor cut him off. You beat a woman in front of her child, Victor said quietly. Why? The men said nothing. I asked you a question, Victor continued, his voice steady. Why? One man swallowed hard. She owed money. Victor nodded. How much? Doesn't matter, the man snapped, desperation creeping in. We didn't know she was poor, Victor finished. Alone. The man flinched. Victor stepped closer. She cleaned offices at night, Victor said. You took what little she had. One of the men dropped to his knees. Please, we didn't know, Victor crouched in front of him. Her daughter came to me, Victor said softly. Do you know what that means? The man shook his head frantically. It means, Victor continued, that you failed to understand the world you live in. Victor stood. Take them, he said. Marco's men moved instantly. The screams echoed briefly, cut short, controlled. Victor turned away before it was finished. By dawn, the warehouse was empty. No bodies, no blood in the street, no witnesses. The men were gone, so was their operation. Victor stood by the river, hands in his coat pockets, watching the water move relentlessly forward. Word will spread, Marco said quietly. People will ask why. Victor nodded. Let them. Back at the safe house, Alina woke to the sound of birds. For a moment, she forgot everything. Then the pain reminded her. She shifted carefully, wincing. Leela stirred beside her. Mom. I'm here, Alina whispered, pulling her closer. A knock came at the door. Alina tensed. Marco entered, followed by Victor. They won't bother you again, Victor said. Alina searched his face. What did you do? Victor didn't answer directly. You can stay here as long as you need. Alina swallowed, and after, Victor met her gaze. After, you'll have options. Leela looked up at Victor. Are they gone? Victor knelt again. Yes. For real, he said. Leela studied his face carefully, then nodded. Okay. That trust hit Victor harder than any threat ever had. Later, Marco pulled Victor aside. You crossed a line tonight, Marco said. Not with them, with yourself. Victor looked toward the window where Leela was drawing quietly at the table. They hurt someone who couldn't fight back, Victor replied. That line was already crossed. Marco hesitated. This will change things. Victor nodded. It already has. Because this time Victor hadn't acted to protect territory or reputation. He de-acted because a child had asked him to, and that made it different. The city would feel it soon enough. The rules had shifted. Quietly, permanently, the consequences didn't arrive with sirens, they arrived with silence. Victor Salerno felt it before anyone said a word. The city had a rhythm, an unspoken pulse he'd learned to read over decades. When that rhythm changed, it meant something had shifted beneath the surface. Phones rang less. Messages were shorter, people hesitated. The warehouse incident had traveled fast, even without names attached to it. Men talked. Whispers moved through bars, back offices, construction sites, anywhere fear lived comfortably. Someone powerful had intervened. Someone had drawn a line, and lines always invited questions. Victor sat in his office that morning, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing in particular as Marco stood nearby. Riverside crews are asking for clarification, Marco said carefully. They want to know if collections are still greenlit in low-income zones. Victor didn't respond immediately. Clarification, he repeated quietly. Marco nodded. They're nervous, the message was strong. Victor exhaled slowly. That's the point, he said. Marco shifted his weight. Boss, with respect, this wasn't strategic, it was personal. Victor finally looked up. Yes, he said simply. That answer unsettled Marco more than any denial would have. Across town, Alina sat at the kitchen table of the safe house, staring at a mug of tea she hadn't touched. Her body still ached. Purple bruises bloomed along her arms and face, stark reminders of what fear looked like when it left marks. Leela colored beside her quietly, humming to herself. Mom, Leela said suddenly, are we bad people? Alina's heart clenched. No, sweetheart, why would you ask that? Leela shrugged. Because bad things keep happening to us. Alina reached out, gently brushing hair from her daughter's face. Bad things happen to good people sometimes, that doesn't make them bad. Leela seemed to consider that deeply, then nodded. Okay, she said and went back to coloring. Alina swallowed hard. She'd lived her whole life trying not to be noticed, trying not to owe anyone anything. And now, because of one night and one child's courage, she was sitting under the protection of a man whose name people spoke in whispers. It terrified her. And yet she felt safer than she had in years. That contradiction weighed heavily. By afternoon, the first real threat surfaced. Marco returned to Victor's office, expression tight. Northside outfit is pushing back, he said. They think your move makes you look soft. Victor raised an eyebrow, soft. They're testing boundaries, Marco continued. Sending feelers, seeing if you'll respond. Victor leaned back in his chair. Let them test, he said. Marco frowned. If you don't respond, they'll escalate. Victor stood. They already escalated, he said quietly. They hurt a woman and a child. Marco held his gaze. This path you're on, it invites war. Victor didn't deny it. Power always does, he replied. That evening, Victor visited the safe house again. He didn't announce himself. He never did. Alina stiffened when she saw him at the doorway. I'm not here to scare you, Victor said calmly, noticing her reaction. I wanted to talk. Alina nodded cautiously. About what? About what comes next, Victor replied. They sat across from each other at the table while Leela played in the other room, humming again. You can't stay here forever, Victor said, and I won't pretend my protection doesn't come with risk. Alina folded her hands tightly. Then why help us at all? Victor met her eyes. Because I made this city what it is. And when people suffer because of that, I bear responsibility. Alina frowned. You're saying this is your fault? I'm saying, Victor replied, that ignoring it would be worse. Alina looked away. I don't want my daughter growing up surrounded by this. Victor nodded, nor should she. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, housing options, financial assistance, names of legal advocates unaffiliated with him directly. Take these, he said. Choose what you want, I won't force anything. Alina stared at the papers, overwhelmed. Why are you doing this? She asked again. Victor paused. Because someone once looked the other way when my family needed help, he said quietly. I learned what that costs. Alina looked up sharply, but Victor had already stood. I'll ensure no one touches you, he said, but the rest should be your choice. He turned to leave. Victor, Alina said softly. He stopped. My daughter believes you saved us, she said. Please don't make her wrong. Victor nodded once. I won't. That night, violence erupted elsewhere. A rival crew attacked one of Victor's peripheral operations, not to win, but to provoke. Marco burst into Victor's office, breath sharp. They hit the docks. Victor's jaw tightened. This is the cost, Marco said. You knew it would come. Victor grabbed his coat. Then it's time to answer. But not the way they expect, Marco added quickly. Victor paused. Yes, he said slowly, not the way they expect. By morning, the docks were quiet again, not because of bloodshed, but because Victor had pulled support entirely. Shut down routes, cut access, forced negotiations. He didn't respond with violence. He responded with control. The message spread faster than fear ever could. Victor Salerno was still powerful, but his power had changed. And that frightened people far more than unpredictability ever had. Back at the safe house, Alina packed a small bag, not to run, to leave properly. She knelt in front of Leela. We're going somewhere new, she said gently. Leela smiled. Like a fresh start? Yes, Alina said, exactly like that. As they stepped outside, Alina looked back once at the quiet house. She didn't know what Victor Salerno would become after this. But she knew one thing with certainty. The night her daughter spoke up had changed more than their lives. It had forced a powerful man to confront the cost of the world he ruled, and that reckoning was far from over. The city adjusted. It always did. But this time, the adjustment felt different, less like fear rearranging itself and more like something learning new boundaries. Victor Salerno noticed it in the weeks that followed. Collections slowed in certain neighborhoods. Reports changed tone. Men who once bragged about intimidation now spoke more carefully, choosing words like resolution and arrangement instead of pressure and force. It wasn't mercy, it was precedent. Victor had made something clear without ever saying it out loud. There were lines you didn't cross. And hurting the powerless was one of them. Some welcomed that shift, others resented it deeply, but no one ignored it. Alina and Leela moved into a small apartment on the other side of the city, nothing luxurious, but bright and clean, with a view of a playground instead of an alley. The first night there, Alina didn't sleep. Not because she was afraid, but because she kept waiting for something to go wrong, for a knock at the door, for a phone call, for consequences she couldn't outrun. But the night passed quietly, so did the next, and slowly something inside her unclenched. Leela started school 2 weeks later. She came home every afternoon with stories about a girl who shared her crayons, a teacher who smiled a lot, a boy who ran too fast during recess and fell. Normal things. Alina listened, smiling, heart aching in a way that felt good and painful all at once. One evening, as Alina tucked Leela into bed, her daughter asked softly, "Do you think the bad men will come back?" Alina brushed her hair gently. "No, sweetheart, they won't." "How do you know?" Alina paused. "Because someone stronger stopped them," she said. Leela nodded sleepily. "Like a superhero?" Alina smiled faintly. "Something like that." Victor Salerno sat alone in his office one night, city lights stretching endlessly beyond the windows. Marco stood nearby, quieter than usual. "You changed things," Marco said finally. Victor didn't look away from the skyline. "I corrected something." Marco hesitated. "People will remember this." Victor turned. "Good," he said. There was a knock at the door. A courier entered, handing Victor a plain envelope. Inside was a single drawing, crayon lines, uneven shapes, a stick figure girl holding hands with a tall man in a suit. Above them, in shaky letters, "Thank you for helping my mom." Victor stared at it for a long time. He folded the paper carefully and placed it in his desk drawer. That night, for the first time in years, Victor slept without reaching for his phone. Months passed. The city didn't become kinder overnight, poverty didn't vanish, fear didn't evaporate, but something subtle had shifted. Predators learned restraint, enforcers learned limits, and people like Alina learned they could breathe again. Alina returned to work full-time. She picked up extra shifts not because she was desperate but because she felt capable again. Stronger, less invisible. One afternoon, as she walked Leela home from school, she noticed a black car idling at the curb. Her heart jumped. The window rolled down. Victor Salerno sat inside. Not surrounded by men, not imposing, just present. I wanted to check in, he said through the open window. That's all. Elena stiffened but didn't step back. We're fine, she said cautiously. I know, Victor replied. I wanted to hear it. Leela tugged on Elena's sleeve. Mom. Elena looked down. It's okay. Victor opened the car door and stepped out slowly, keeping his distance. Leela studied him. You're the man from the restaurant. Victor nodded. I am, thank you, Leela said simply. Victor blinked, clearly caught off guard. You're welcome, he replied. Elena watched closely. I won't be coming back, Victor said to her. I just wanted you to know that. Elena nodded. That's probably best. Victor smiled faintly. I agree. He returned to the car and drove away. No drama, no threats, no unfinished business, just closure. Years later, the story would circulate quietly, not in newspapers, not in documentaries, but in conversations. A little girl who spoke up, a powerful man who listened, a city forced to reckon with itself. Victor Salerno would remain a complicated name, feared by some, respected by others, misunderstood by most. But there would always be one truth that never changed. The night a child said, "They hurt my mom," a man who controlled everything froze and chose to draw a line. Elena stood at her kitchen window one evening watching Leela do homework at the table. The light was warm. The room felt safe. She thought about that night, the restaurant, the fear, the risk her daughter took without understanding the danger. And she realized something important. Power didn't always belong to the loudest voice. Sometimes it belonged to the smallest one brave enough to speak. And because of that courage, a mother and a child had their future back.